Okay, hello to everyone. I'm very pleased to welcome you to the Mario Gerla Award Symposium. This award is given by the Italian scientist and scholar and North American Foundation with support from the family of Mario Gerla. ISSNAF is a non-profit organization whose mission is to connect, empower, and celebrate the Italian research community in North America. The foundation was created in 2007 at the best of 36 prominent scholars, including 4 Nobel Prize winners, and it reaches the largest number of researchers from Italy who operate in US and Canada across all research disciplines. And from what I've seen, those are all very top scientists. Thanks to the generosity of the family of Mario Gerla, who was actually one of the founders of ISSNAF. Every year, starting last year and 2 years ago, we award a Young Investigator Award in the area of computer science. The nominations are submitted, then there is a review committee which selected 3 finalists. And I must say the choice is always very difficult because applications are from very top researchers. So these 3 finalists will give a presentation today, and we have our jury, which includes 2 Italian professors who are in North America in addition to me, Professor Leila de Floriani, who works in the area of computer graphics. She has been the past president of the IEEE Computer Society and has many other important recognitions that she received. Then we have Anna Squicciarini, who is a professor of computer science in Penn State University, and she does some kind of very interesting novel research on societal relevant topics. So I'm very pleased that they agreed to form the jury together with me. So after the presentation, we will meet and decide the award. It will be very difficult, I anticipate. So at this point, without delay our symposium, I would like just to mention that Mario Gerla has been one of the pioneers in the computer science area. He has developed the very groundbreaking protocols for internet and communication network. So we are very pleased that we have an opportunity to commemorate him via this award given to the promising researchers in computer science. So I would like to start introducing the first finalist, who is Ferdinando Fioretto. So Ferdinando, if you can start your presentation, you have 15 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions by the jury. Thank you.
Thank you. So do you see my screen?
Yes, we see the screen.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much for the introduction. This is a really great honor for me. And thank you very much to the Gerla family for supporting this award. So my research focuses on 2 main areas. It studies how to use machine learning model for solving complex optimization problems and how to make AI algorithms better aligned with societal values, especially privacy and fairness. And I'm going to discuss what my group is doing on AI to potentially help with the climate crisis. And I will also give some perspective on privacy and fairness implications of those systems. So critical engineering systems, such as the power grid, supply chains, and transportation systems, they play a crucial role in ensuring social and economic stability. Their operations rely on solving complex optimization problems that they have been highly stable and reliable in the last decades. But the rapid modernization of this system is introducing now significant challenges. Think about the integration of renewable energy in power systems, or the novel return policy in supply chains. So all this is creating notable uncertainty around supply and demands, And this is complicating the operations of the systems. And so in fact, what system operators are doing now is developing solutions that needs to be robust to different operating conditions. So integrating uncertain predictions within the decision-making process. And so this type of problems create substantial computational challenges, which are forcing those operators to produce suboptimal solutions. And this translates in significant economical and societal losses. Take the electrical power system. This is the largest machine built by humankind. Every year in the United States alone, about $400 billion worth of electricity is produced and shipped through the transmission system. It has also a massive climate impact, with about 40% of the total carbon footprint produced from electricity generated through the combustion of fossil fuels. So improving the efficiency of these systems, even slightly, would produce massive benefits for the population at large. And to give you a sense of the problems that we're dealing with here, take a look at the optimal power flow problem that is outlined here on the right. So this is a problem which is solved repeatedly at different time horizons. And so in a nutshell, it determines the generator dispatch of optimal cost that meets the power demands while also satisfying the physical and operational constraints of the system. And now the cost here that we're minimizing is in terms of CO2 emissions or in economical term. And this is a really difficult problem. It's non-convex, non-linear, and additionally, the uncertainty that arises around supply and demand that is created by the integration of new renewable systems is forcing operators to solve those problems with increasing frequencies. But the resolution frequencies to solve those problems is actually limited by their computational complexity. And thus, to address this issue, what the systems operators do is not solving this full nonlinear system here, but solving a simplified version of it, more technically, a relaxation or an approximation of it. And so this is more efficient computationally on one hand, but those simplifications also bring suboptimalities, which might induce substantial economic losses. And so the question that we're asking here is, can we build better approximation? Because once again, even with slight improvements, we'd be able to obtain massive societal benefits. But building those approximations is a non-trivial task. It's problem specific, involves a lot of optimization theory in general. And thus, the idea we've been working on for a few years now is to take at this problem and look at it from a slightly different angle. So we have this original minimizer here, like our optimal power flow, and we want to derive a reliable approximation O tilde of the original problem O. And then we ask, is it possible to take a data-driven approach to learn to approximate those relaxations, those approximations? And to answer this question, we have developed a framework that integrates discrete and continuous optimization with machine learning to provide near optimal approximations to our problem of interest. And this is motivated by engineering systems like the power network that produce a lot of data while solving this type of optimization problems daily. So the learning task takes as input some data that describes the problem and its associated solutions. And what it does, it learns to estimate a parametric version of the original minimizer. And this is for us a neural network. And so to obtain this minimizer, this network ideally should solve the following problem. So this is an empirical risk minimization, which reduces the prediction error, but we're also interested in satisfying the constraints of the problem. And the challenge here really lies in those constraints, which can represent physical and operational limits and cannot be explicitly taken into account into a learning task. And so a naive approach that ignores those constraints is likely to result in predictions that will significantly violate them and thus renders them unusable. So the question here is, how can we enable a deep learning model to take into account those constraints during the predictions? And my group has proposed several integrations of continuous and discrete optimization and learning, so to enhance the system to take into account of those constraints. And one particular solution that we have proposed exploits Lagrangian duality, where essentially the learning task is continuously augmented with constraints violations that we're experiencing during training. So to learn producing not only strong approximations of the original problem, but also to learn to satisfy the underlying constraint. And so when we apply this framework, which we call deep constraint learning, to solving the OPF prevalent problem in power systems, this technology shows that it can really obtain strong results. So these tables are showing results for 3 representative test cases, increasing complexity, but we've tested this system extensively on data that we're obtaining through a collaboration with RT, which is the French transmission system. And the proposed system, which is outlined red here, I want to focus on the comparison of this system here against the blue one, which is the current industry standard, which goes under the name of DC. And so the first table shows how far we are, so how far the predictions are from the closest feasible solution, which is to say how close we are to satisfy the constraints of the full nonlinear problem. And here you can see that our model brings over an order of magnitude improvements. And I also wanted to notice that we are in a physical and dynamic system. So violating those constraints a little bit will be fine, as the stability of the system will be ensured by the mechanical control systems, which act at very small time frames. So here we are well within the tolerance of the systems. And the second table shows on the improvements in terms of costs of the system, which is showing that this ML and optimization-based solution here, it's within 0.2% on average of optimality, which is really unprecedented for this type of system, especially if we are considering the time scales that we're needing for solving such type of problems, which, since we're just requiring a linear pass over the neural network, we can really output predictions in milliseconds. So although I focused on power systems in the previous slides, this methodology is general purpose, and we have also been applied for approximating other optimization problems in other application areas with large impact on climate change, including gas networks, cloud computing, task allocation problems, and also in learning non-discriminatory classifiers. Together with the collaborators at Georgia Tech, we are currently working with RT, who owns and operates the largest transmission system in Europe, and the Midwestern transmission operator, with the hope of facilitating the dissemination of this research to industry, both in the US and in Europe. And the interesting thing is that while working with those partners, we have also learned that accessing these critical data sets, which are key for the stability of our approaches, is often tightly regulated by privacy and national security concerns. And so, for instance, if you think of the electrical load of an industrial customer, releasing it might indirectly reveal sensitive information on the production level of that customer, as well as in strategic investment. And so our partner, we're really concerned about such type of issues. Similarly, the ability to link the physical and cyber locations of power generators can be exploited by an attacker to run coordinated attacks on those cyber physical facilities. And so this really brings me to the second objective of my research, which is that of creating defense mechanisms that allow us to use sensitive data during the learning or optimization phases without releasing protected information. And so the theory and algorithms that we have developed relies on the adoption of differential privacy, which is strong privacy notions that relies on adding calibrated noise on the input data or on the model to ensure that some given bounds on the privacy protections can be attained. And the unique feature of my research in this field is the use of optimization-based approaches to essentially redistribute the noise which is needed by a differential privacy algorithm while preserving the salient features of the applications of interest. And so using this type of techniques, we are able to release data that on one hand is guaranteed to be privacy preserving. On the other hand, it also satisfies important constraints which capture the essence of the application of interest. And so in practice, this means that the released data sets are of high applicative value. And in fact, various flavors of these techniques have been put into practice in several contexts, including releasing streams of Wi-Fi data within the Private Scope project at the University of Michigan. This is a fully deployed system that allows researchers to use real-time data privately for several studies. We also have been working with the Tonic AI, which is a privacy company that curates IoT and healthcare data. And we recently started a collaboration to audit the current data release strategy by the census. And in this regard, I've also been very interested to understand the effects of the errors that are induced by privacy when privacy preserving data is used as input to make important decisions. So, for example, take the US Census. The census has recently adopted differential privacy to release their 2020 data products. And now this data is extremely important because it is used to for a variety of tasks. To determine the numbers of seats each state has in the US House of Representatives. It is also used to distribute over $700 billion in federal funds to local communities. And so, for example, on this slide here, I'm showing the Title I Elementary and Secondary School Act, which is one of the largest programs in the US offering educational assistance to disadvantaged children. Essentially, the allotment looks at the number of children which are qualifying for these benefits in a school district and allocates resources based on this proportion. And in a recent study, we have shown that using differential, when we're using differential privacy census data to make this type of allotments, the errors that are induced by the process can cause substantial disparity in misallocation. So here we're showing this type of disparity of the allocations ordered by the school district size in the state of New York. And typically what happens is that small school districts are typically overestimated in their allocation, while large school districts are typically underestimated. And so translated in economical terms for this type of privacy factors, some school districts may receive up to $42,000 less than warranted, which results in large fairness issues. But those fairness issues are present.
You have 2 minutes left. Sorry.
Those fairness issues are present also in a variety of other problems. So, for example, in the Minority Language Voting Act, which includes translating voter registration, ballots, and instructions for minority language of interest, those are benefits which are guarantees for local jurisdictions, which population satisfies some requirements. And those requirements essentially look at the number of people in a minority, in the number of people in a jurisdiction speaking a minority language, those that have English proficiency, and those that also have low grade education. And it is estimated that about 22 million voting age citizens were impacted by this benefit here during the last election. And so here we're illustrating the decision errors on the y-axis for the Hispanic language sorted by the population size, actually the distance of the population size from a threshold which appears in this formula. And the errors are on the true positives, which are particularly important because misclassification here implies disenfranchising groups of individuals. And so the figure shows that there are significant disparities in decision errors, and that those errors are strongly correlated with distance to this threshold. And so the first time actually we observed those results, it was mind-blowing for me, because just because you're living in a district that has a population with a certain characteristics and whose size is close to an arbitrary set threshold, then this will put you in a higher risk for not receiving that particular benefit. So we have approached those studies theoretically to gain insights on the reasons why those disparities are arising when using privacy preserving data. And we're collaborating with nonprofits that use census data for these important determinations to inform and reduce essentially the effects of this bias. So to summarize, my research was motivated by the desire of improving the efficiency of critical engineering systems with large climate impact, while also taking into account privacy concerns. We have developed an integration of machine learning and optimization theory to solve decision-making over large-scale infrastructures, which are featuring complex physical and engineering constraints. We've also developed optimization-based techniques to protect data privacy while preserving the features of the application of interest and analyze the trade-off between privacy and fairness in important determinations. And the goal of my research is to contribute to tackling societal challenges, which includes economic growth, climate emergency, and human rights. So I want to thank you, and I thank my amazing students and collaborators from Italy and the US and the sponsors that are supporting my research.
Yeah, thank you. So I would ask Leila and Anna if you know who want to go first with a question.
Sure, either works.
Yeah. Anna, go first then. Okay, so
yes, sure. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on how you showed some examples on the results of applying some constraints into the deep learning models, and you were a bit high level on, you mentioned multiple methods that you use to apply to include constraints, and I assume this was depending on the type of constraints and the guarantees. I wonder if you could just zoom in, for example, on the specific examples that, you know, the technique that you showed results for. That's the question number one. And question number two is related to complexity, because I'm assuming no matter what method you're adding, you're definitely adding more computation in whether the method is iterative or whether you have to, I don't know if you do it at every round in an iterative fashion or if it's a one check for multiple rounds and so forth. But what is the cost of adding constraints? And are there any bounds in these constraints in terms of what constraints are you unable to efficiently include in your models, because otherwise complexity burns or you cannot reach convergence?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So let's start from a categorization of this type of constraints.
Yeah, try to provide a quick reply, okay, because we don't have a
much. Okay, I will try, but maybe we can take this offline then. So I essentially, based on the classes of problems, you can guarantee the satisfaction of the constraints exactly. So for example, if you have, firstly, if the structure of the constraints is invariant with respect to the samples that you have, then the objective might be, for example, that of predicting the cost coefficients of a linear program. And if the structure of the constraint is invariant, so you just want to learn really to satisfy those constraints within this type of prediction framework here, then for linear or convex programs, then we are able to compute gradients exactly, or approximated actually forms of it, depending on the quality that we want to achieve. And we're able to propagate this information in an end-to-end fashion. Because the linear program or the convex program is embedded as a last layer of the network, you're guaranteed to satisfy those constraints. In the application that I showed here, this is just another bit, because essentially the constraints, the combinatorial structure vary for each sample, and also the nature of the constraints is nonlinear, yet it's differentiable. And so that allowed us to build essentially Lagrangian dual models. So we're constructing a Lagrangian relaxation of the model, and then we're building this, we're essentially—
You said Lagrangian, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, so essentially at every cycle, so you run your primal, you approximate your primal for one iteration, then you learn the dual variable, so you maximize the dual variables in for all the constraints, which is obviously quick, because the constraints are assessed just in one step. And then you are augmenting the loss function with those learned new weights, augmenting the violations of those constraints, and you iterate. So does this work for all problems?
Yeah, I think we should continue. So because I would like to give Leila the opportunity to see if Leila has a question. Short one, bro.
Yes, actually, I have a couple of very quick questions. When you talk about electric power system, you refer to that availability of massive data. Can you give us an idea of what you mean? And actually leads me to the second question. You saw how this AI bias method, this deep constraint learning method you have developed is advantageous with classical more optimization methods. But what you consider are the limitation and of that, and what needs to be done to overcome them? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So firstly, on the data, it's other than the massive scale is the granularity of the data itself. So some test cases exist out there that we're typically using in optimization contexts. But yeah, there was just recently concluded the Go competition organized with ARPA-E, which was really looking at fidelity of these data sets at small granularities. So really going inside each bus and understanding what type of decisions you need to make inside each bus and so on. So all those type of structure was basically unavailable until before collaborator and I have started essentially looking at this type of problems with these operators in Europe. And so obtaining the data is actually extremely sensitive and it's extremely challenging. So you inevitably need to run certain obfuscation forms before releasing this type of data, simply because of the nature of the systems. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, for the limitation of this approach, of those approaches here, well, definitely the combinatorial structure of the problem. We're not claiming that we can learn exactly the combinatorial structure of the problems, because otherwise we would be solving an NMPL problem in polynomial time. But in this type of context here, where you're solving problems that have repeated structure, and you're solving problems in a repeated fashion, then there are patterns that maybe are not learnable with simple heuristics, but the hidden representation of the network is actually able to attain. Studying how to translate the hidden representation onto techniques that are used by optimization solver would be an extremely interesting challenge.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I would like to thank Ferdinando and Leila and Anna. So let's move to next finalist, who is Filippo Malandra, an assistant professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering and SUNY Buffalo. Please start and stay in 15 minutes, okay?
Thank you for the introduction, Elisa. And I wanted also to thank the ISSNAF and the Gerla family for supporting this award, which I'm honored to be a finalist of. So today I'm glad to present some of the results in my research. And so my research mainly focused on wireless networks. I study wireless networks in order to enable to see how they could be useful to enable smart systems such as smart cities, smart grid, Internet of Things. And I try to push the performance and understand the dynamics of these systems to a way they could provide major societal benefits. Today I would like to present two of my projects. The first one is on the IoT traffic characterization and LTE performance analysis. Second one is more related to the use of wireless network for smart cities. One of the basic problems we have when we talk about Internet of Things and in general connected devices, we know that there is a huge growth of these devices, that require internet connectivity. In this graph, we can see a prediction, some historical data and a prediction on the number of connected devices, broken down differentiating non-IoT devices and IoT devices. And we can see that the rate at which IoT devices the number of IoT devices is growing. It's much higher than non-IoT devices. So they will outnumber in the future years. One of the major consequences of this is that humans and IoT devices will be likely to share the same communication infrastructure. So IoT devices will need a communication infrastructure to transmit and receive their data. And it would be highly impractical to have a dedicated communication infrastructure for them. This is why they will be sharing communication with us. And one of the problems with this approach is that the type of traffic is very different. So they will produce a type of traffic, type of telecommunication traffic considerably different. And the network was conceived to support human traffic. So we don't really know how the network will react to this massive introduction of IoT traffic. This leads to some basic research questions. So what type of IoT devices will communicate? There will be a large multitude of IoT devices, and they will all differ with respect to the constraint they will introduce, with respect to the communication requirements. We're also interested in knowing where these IoT devices are located and what type of traffic they will produce. And this leads to the first objective of this research, which is on the traffic characterization for IoT devices. We have had also other questions because these devices needs to communicate, and we want to know what communication networks are available, how to assess the most suitable for this type of communication, and the impact on existing communication, because we don't want that this introduction will disturb and degrade the performance of human communication. This leads to the second objective, which is on the performance analysis of wireless networks for IoT systems. To address some of these questions, I propose a web-based application, which is available in this website, which has 5 main components. So the first one, I consider LTE networks. It's really a use case, and it can be easily extended to other types of networks, such as 5G and others. And the interesting fact is that I consider the geographical location of the InnoVs, which are the antennas, the LTE base station, and also very detailed characteristic of the transmission, such as the carrier frequency, the bandwidth, the power that these antennas emit, and also some geographic components such as the height, the azimuth, the orientation of the antennas. This permits us to compute, characterize the radio channel, the propagation, and compute the signal to interference and noise ratio, which is a key parameter in all wireless systems. You can see here I represented an image with all the base stations in a certain area. We can restrict the analysis to a particular area, such as a smart city, filter out the base station, and consider the network of only one operator. This will permit to subdivide the area in cells, so that we can analyze the impact of IoT devices to each specific antenna, which is the key in this context. We also want to collect data. We need data for machine-to-machine communication and Internet of Things communication. And these are large-scale data and sometimes very difficult to retrieve. And why do we need the actual position of the users in this type of systems? Why is the geographical data very important? I give you an example here. On the left, you can see a network with 3 types of devices, such as IoT devices in a home, or street lights or traffic lights, which are randomly distributed in a square. If we consider the actual position of them in a city scenario, it will be considerably different than if we were to use random position. And this has a major impact on the fitness to reality. So we provide more realistic results by considering the actual position. We also, we know where the antennas are located and what type of characteristics they have, and we know where the users are. Now we need to generate traffic. Since it's very difficult to generate traffic, so to know how the traffic was generated, so to have access to traffic traces, and most importantly, because some of these applications are not yet implemented. We are assuming that, for instance, all the traffic lights will start generating traffic, and we want to shape this traffic. We want to characterize this traffic. In order to do so, we are associating some mathematical distributions to generate traffic at these specific locations that we have just described. And I consider 3GPP, which is the entity mandating the standard for cellular communication, which mandates the use of Poisson and beta distribution. But I'm also using custom applications based distribution based on scheduled data and historical data, and also periodic distribution. This is to broaden the set of possible applications that I can represent in my research. After having said so we know how to generate traffic. We want to actually analyze this traffic. So we want to see what this traffic looks like. And to do so, I implemented this visual tool, web-based visual tool that shows a measure, like some metrics on the traffic generated in this area. This is the island of Montreal. And all these regions are the so-called Voronoi regions. So each of these represent one base station. And the color in this heat map is related to a certain performance parameter. In this case, it's the total traffic, but this is just an example. There are many parameters that can be generated. And this can show the impact on the IoT traffic in a real area. From an operator perspective, you can know that you can understand if there are limits, if there are limits in your current network, and you can improve the design. You can also see the trend, in this case of packet generation, over time, to see how it evolves over time. This is one of the capabilities of the tool. Moreover, we also want to analyze the network performance. So we use this traffic, and with an underlying LTE network simulator, we assess the impact on the performance of the network caused by a massive introduction of IoT traffic. And in this case, for instance, with the same concept as before, with using the Voronoi regions, we have a visual, we have an image showing the collision probability in this area, in each of the cells in this area. And we can also distinguish we can also analyze these parameters, these KPIs, by the type of application, so that we can understand, for instance, if the traffic lights are generating too much traffic or are causing troubles in the network by causing collisions, for instance. So wrapping up, in this project, we have considered a real communication infrastructure, which is very important in a smart city scenario, considering geographical data for IoT devices, and using random and deterministic distributions to generate this type of traffic. We've carried out large-scale realistic traffic simulation with a number of users ranging in the hundreds of thousands, and analyzed the network performance when we introduce this type of traffic. The second project I would like to discuss today is on the wireless network for smart cities. We all know that in the smart cities, there are a lot of applications, as was also mentioned in Ferdinando's talk. We have smart parking, we have waste management, intelligent transportation system. The problem is that all these applications require internet connectivity. So without internet connectivity, you cannot access to most of these applications. Moreover, internet has become a key resource to access to very important services such as health and education. And we are witnessing this in particular in these days, where, for instance, if you can think of remote education, without a good internet connection, you cannot, children cannot attend classes, and they cannot attend remote education. The problem with this is that there are many people that are cut out of these opportunities. So recent statistics show that 70 million US residents lack a basic internet access. And this is the so-called digital divide problem. So there are opportunities, and some people without internet access, they are cut out of these opportunities. And what I want to do with this project, I want to bridge the digital divide and provide an opportunity to provide internet connectivity to these families. As a side note, in 2015, the FCC opened a 150 megahertz spectrum that is identified as citizen broadband radio service. So it is a spectrum really intended to provide services to citizens. And I'm using this spectrum in this project to deploy a private LTE network and provide broadband internet connectivity to a particular community in Buffalo called the Fruit Belt. This project was one of the 7 awardees of a broader initiative, which is called Project Overcome, which aims at bridging the digital divide in the US. So we have selected this neighborhood, which has a serious problem with internet connectivity. And we are deploying our LTE network using this spectrum, and we will provide free of charge internet connectivity with these characteristics. So 25 to 50 megabits in uplink, in downlink, and 3 to 5 in uplink to 150 families. And the novel approach relies on the fact that we are considering the community not as a passive recipient of the broadband connectivity, but as an active contributor of the initiative. And I will show how.
You have 2 minutes left.
Thanks. So this is an architecture of our system. And we have installed 4 LTE antennas on top of the Buffalo General Hospital, which is conveniently located in terms of the neighborhood that we want to serve. We will be broadcasting LTE signal. There is a backend internet connectivity here, and the LTE signal will be used to broadcast the internet to these households, and they will use a Wi-Fi access point to surf the web. We realized that the wireless infrastructure is not the only tool that we have to fight the digital divide, because many families, they do not have a computing device capable of connecting to the internet. This is why we retrieved additional grant to purchase devices such as desktop cameras and headsets and provide these for free to families in the neighborhood. We have also realized that if some people did not have a computing device, it's highly likely that they didn't know how to use the internet. They don't know how to use the internet. This is why we are providing the so-called digital literacy training. So training in the community to make sure that people will be knowledgeable on the use of the internet, adopting the training the trainers approach, so that we will train community members so that they can spread the word in the community and help with the support and maintenance of the network. And this increases the self-sustainability of our approach, because it will be a lower cost than if provided by a third-party communication provider. We also need to partner to retrieve additional funds, because we want this initiative that to survive at grant expiration, which is only 1 year. This is a list of partners that will help us achieve our goal. So wrapping up, we have identified a neighborhood with inadequate access to broadband internet, and we are deploying a private LTE network to provide these families, 150 families, with internet access for free. We're also providing devices so that they could enjoy and surf the web, and digital literacy training so that they can have a responsible use of the internet. And we have critical partners, partnership with network providers, community-based association, non-profit, city administration. And the most important thing is that we want to have a model, a self-sustainable model that can be potentially extended to other communities throughout the US or in the world. Thank you very much for your time, and I will be glad to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Filippo. So if Leila and Anna agree, this time I'll ask a question since I didn't ask before. So Filippo, my question is the following. In your first project, the simulation environment, for the IoT devices, did you consider the specialized LTE protocols like the CATM or the narrow bandwidth IoT, or you consider the conventional LTE protocols for those devices?
Thanks for the question, Elisa. At the beginning of the project, I was considering a regular LTE. Yeah. And in my research, I identified some of the bottlenecks of this technology related to the type of access, because it's not intended for IoT devices. But now that there are other standards such as LTE, CATM, and narrowband IoT, I am introducing them in the tool, and they will be available very soon. And because that's very important. But what I wanted to show is that the model does not really depend on the type of technology, because it can analyze different type of technology, network technology.
Okay, so Leila, Anna, do you have questions?
I can go quickly. I have actually a curiosity about your first part when you talk about IoT traffic classification, and the curiosity is about when you're discussing about your data for IoT devices, you build a Voronoi diagram. This is a sort of a static case, or I mean, I assume that will be updated in the data. Are you considering that?
You mean static in the position or static data?
in the position? And somehow I would say that the Voronoi diagram should evolve over time, or
they are intended to be static at first, because we want to have it. It's also meaningful to have an analysis with static data, because if you restrict your time horizon, it can be modeled as a static one. But we are considering to introduce mobility. But with the mobility, we won't be able to have such large scale, because mobility will introduce complexity. So we have, in addition to this simulator, so this large scale simulator, we have narrowed down a less high level simulator, a more specific to a local area, more local simulator, in which we're considering mobility, handovers, and just for a subset of the cells in a smart city.
Thank you.
Question, or we can, no, quick question. If not, that's okay.
I'm muted. I think it's fine. I think you already have 2 questions. We can keep, yes, we can keep it fair. You're muted.
Our third finalist, Sara Rampazzi. She's an assistant professor at the University of Florida, and in the Department of Computer and Information Science and Engineering. So Sara, welcome to the symposium. You have the floor. Again, stay in 15 minutes with your.
Okay, I hope everybody can see my slide.
Yes, yes, we can see them. Very nice.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me and giving me the possibility to present my research here for this prestigious award. I'm Dr. Sara Rampazzi, as I was introduced, and I'm an assistant professor in cyber physical system security at the Information Science and Engineering Department at the University of Florida, and also a member of the Florida Institute of Cybersecurity Research and the Warner NEMS Institute for Connected World. So I came from Italy and got my PhD there in computer science engineering at the University of Pavia, developing portable biosensor for antibody detection for food and liquid samples. And after my PhD, I work in the automotive and aerospace industry. And this experience on developing hardware and software for safety critical systems made me grow interest in security, especially on how to design the system from a security and safety perspective. I got the opportunity to continue this research in academia, and I joined first the University of Michigan as a research faculty, and then January in this year, I joined the University of Florida as an assistant professor. So the core of my research work is assessing cyber physical system trustworthiness, namely if we can rely on this system to perform automatic decision, even when under cyber attacks. So, but which kind of a cyber attacks I'm considering here? So every system today, from IoT devices such as smart speakers to autonomous systems such as drones and autonomous vehicles, to critical infrastructure such as power grid or healthcare network systems, are systems that communicate via internet, that share their data over the network, and perceive the world through their sensors, and also like human interaction through it. And they take automated decision based on this data using artificial intelligence algorithm. So correct measurement from the environment and the user interaction are essential to perform this correct operation. However, the system almost always blindly rely on this input data without questioning if like the perception is correct. So the question here is that how this system was trustworthy? And the answer is like not always as we might thought. And we can see this aspect more often than we think. So sometimes external phenomenon can alter like the sensor and the input that the system receives. For example, sometimes car vibration can induce sensor to perceive passengers on a car seat when they aren't. Or like a magnet in an iPhone can deactivate implantable cardiac devices. And there is an autopilot system that confuses a burger commercial as a stop sign, or a phone that can turn on a oven. And even like more worrisome, like a loud sound that can shut down entire data centers. So, but why this effect that we notice around are accidental? Cybercriminals can use intentional stimuli such as electromagnetic interference, sounds, and even light, for example, to alter the behavior and the automatic decision that the system takes. And even use that to eavesdrop sensitive information, causing severe like security and both privacy vulnerabilities and threats. So my research core is to study this phenomenon and develop both hardware and software solution combined to ensure like the resiliency of these systems against attacks, with the ultimate goal to ensure security and safety for the end user. But why this happened in the first place? Well, the reason it hangs in the boundaries between like electronic device and software. So electronic components are affected by like external physical phenomena because they are exposed to it, and especially sensor can perceive more than what they are designed for and what we think they should do. And different from traditional security threats over the internet, such as like malware, botnet, and other type of network threats, the subtle alteration can bypass this traditional protection mechanism that we usually implement in our system, such as, for example, antivirus or even password, for example. And also, this is more subtle, like this threat, because it can remain unnoticed from the system itself and from the user, because the system is not able to distinguish what is a legitimate signal from the environment or the user, and what is not, what is a malicious signal. So escalating wrong measurement and perception from like the hardware layer through like the automatic decision layer in a more higher level. So as an example of what I'm talking about, I will show my most recent work on voice assistant technology. So nowadays we have devices in our home, in our hands, such as smart speakers and phones that can recognize our voice and execute commands like Alexa, buy me a pen, or okay, Google, open the garage door. So our voice is captured by a microphone sensors, and our command is recognized using artificial intelligence algorithm, machine learning algorithm, and a processor elaborates this command, and then a device executes the command itself. So what we expect is that microphone sensors of this device only are able to capture our voice and our commands. But my team and I discovered that like these microphone sensors that we use every day, like in our phones and tablets, are very similar. And they can perceive light as it was sound. What does it mean? This capability that we define and we call it oversensing means that this sensor can perceive light changes in the same way that acoustic waves are captured by the device. So as you can see in this figure, for example, using a laser and a strong light on a microphone, and we try to like inject a normal sine wave that represents, that can be a tone, for example. The microphone, as you can see, will record the same signal. So modulating, for example, a light beam to follow a recorded audio signal saying the command, for example, okay, Google, open the garage door. The smart speaker with the same microphone reply in the same way as the command was spoken by a real person. So we explored this kind of vulnerability. So this is a project in collaboration also with like the University of Electrical Communication in Japan and the University of Michigan. And we were able to access more than 15 different devices, from smart speaker to security cameras to phones, tablet, thermostat. We embedded a very different variety of voice assistant system, like Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri, and the Facebook portal assistant. By injecting commands, we were able to like reach distances for more than 110 meters away and between buildings, and also because we're using light passing over closed windows. So, and we did that like even more worrisome with a laser pointer light, so equivalent of what we can use for our presentation, like what we are doing, like using some optics. So, and another important thing about like this vulnerability is that the speaker personalization that usually is doing to detect which kind of like person is the owner of the device was ineffective to stop the attack, since this technology is not advanced enough, like in the moment, to basically distinguish similar voice to each other's. And like the similar voice of these devices, even if trained to recognize the voice, can be generated using free available sources like text-to-speech converters. But except for setting this command from not authorized user and also being able to retrieve information from this device, so it is also a privacy issue compared to this maybe from this type of attack, we discovered that actually we were able also to have full control of all the devices that were connected over the voice assistant. For example, we were able to enable or disable security cameras. And we were able to brute force the PIN number of a smart lock to open the doors, since there was no mechanism to stop the attempts after like a certain numbers of failed trials. That's because the system, like the IoT devices, was in interface with the voice assistant. Instead of like a normal user. So we were able to make purchases and even start or maybe open the door and start the engines of cars such as Tesla and Ford. So a vulnerability that started from an IoT device was propagating through other systems connected to the same device, bypassing all the standard security mechanism. So like in the case of the PIN number. So to defend against this vulnerability, my work, rather than considering hardware and software as separate entities, I designed techniques both hardware and software combined to ensure protection against this type of attacks across different systems. Protecting both sensors, so from the hardware level, for example, developing hardware strategies like light blocking shutter for sensors, so like an adjustment to like the hardware. To do that, to like help also like a voice assistant system, for example, by developing data-driven techniques to improve access control or like anomaly detection, even in the control level. And following on a mantra, there is like a prevention, detection, and mitigation. So what I mean by this is that that is only like not limited to software, but is a sort of a three-pronged approach. Prevention to limit the oversensing capability and the other level, detection to able to rapidly react upon the event, and mitigation to allow the system to attenuate and filter out like unauthorized signals. But the vulnerability that we just saw can also affect maybe the privacy and security of IoT systems. But I also investigate how machine learning models of critical systems can be affected by the similar phenomena. So in collaboration with the Autonomous Vehicles Facility on City and the University of Michigan, I investigated the robustness of autonomous cars' advanced driver assistant perception systems using for obstacle avoidance. So this system usually enhances the driver capability, but they also take partial or full control automatically of critical driving processing, like steering or activating the brakes. So this kind of automatic operation are safety critical for the passenger and the drivers. So my team and I were able to use, like in this case, light injection to generate fake obstacles in front of the road by spoofing the car's sensors. This allows an attacker to manipulate the driving decision of a car remotely, such as suddenly activating the emergency brakes. And you can understand that this automatic ground decision escalates from the sensor to like the prediction model, or maybe the obstacle detection and the prediction model. And like they can, this wrong decision can easily put the driver and the passenger and pedestrian also in danger.
Sara,
From this,
you have 2 minutes left.
Yes. Okay. So from this study, we start a branch of research related to how autonomous system machine learning models use it to detect obstacles are designed for security and this kind of threats, and how they performs under like this type of vulnerabilities. So my research also cover not only like hardware and software enhancement to mitigate this kind of vulnerabilities, but also building tools and frameworks for real-time diagnostic. So we are starting research on forensics analysis with also like combining explainability techniques for user interaction in security for this kind of input, untrustworthy input. So the goal is to augment the system reliability to allow the user to use this technology safely. So to conclude, my research investigate how hardware components and sensors can be used as a vector to undermine automated decision and also artificially based technology. So I investigated from IoT devices, cyber physical system, such as a laptop, mobile phone, and also like normal IoT devices, but also healthcare and medical devices system, and even more broader chain, like a supply chain and transportation security in general. So in my lab, we also reveal and we study these attacks. They're so generic, but conceptually similar in the type of vulnerability that they exploit. So we use that in the analysis of these attacks to reveal hints or not yet been discovered attacks and how to better prevent them from the design phase without waiting for an accident or a breach to happen. So my goal is to change the approach to security by design and work in the team boundary between hardware and software and the subtle interconnection and interaction to build a resilient and trustworthy technology. And now I will be happy to answer all your questions.
Okay, I don't know who wants to start, Anna or Leila?
I can start, it's fine, either is fine. Okay, thank you. Just a very quick question. When you tested the oversensing attack with the laser device, I was wondering if you did some sort of generalizability test, or how generalizable is this attack? Is it specific to certain vendors and certain products, or were you able to generalize it across platforms, so long as I assume some underlying technology for voice recognition and so forth held consistent?
Yes, we test more than, like in total, we're around 17 different devices. Each of them were with different like microphone technology, because we are talking about different microphones. We tested phones, like 3 models of phones with different vendors, so iPhone and Android, and we tested tablet, like iPad, and also thermostat. We test like a lot of different devices. Each of them have with microphones susceptible to the same attack. We
So
didn't change anything.
What would be the assumption? What would be the attacker? What would be the assumptions underlying an attacker that is performing this model? So, what would you assume the attacker model be like? Seems very specific as an attack, right?
Yeah, in reality, it is not completely specific. So the only constraint on that is being able to aim the laser on the microphone door, like on the hole on the top of the device. So usually you have to think that smart speakers have up to 8 microphones, and just is enough to attack one to like undermine the entire system. And on the phone, like I can see here, we have like at least 3 different microphones, like behind, in front, and on the side. So like in this case is the technology. So these microphones that are widely distributed are MEMS microphones. They all work on the same principle. So they are all accessible in various levels. So in this case, just the aiming is like the more important thing. So if you notice the new generation, or maybe after these attacks came out, we have like a lot of media attention on it. The new generation of smart speaker and device try to cover the microphone port, because the more you are exposed to this external like signal, the more the attack is effective. But we were able also to attack a device that were covered. So the like is the sensor itself, is the design of the sensors.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll ask a question. So, yeah, thank you. It's nice to look at those specific attacks. And there's been a lot of work done actually since 10 years on this topic. But I wonder, in the future, we see that those numbers of IoT devices will be huge, like houses may have thousands of them. So at the end of the day, you know, how can anyone even protect such huge numbers? So, because your techniques seem to be very specific for single device, but we need more comprehensive approaches. So which is your take on this?
So definitely we need a more comprehensive approach. So like the technology, or maybe depends on the system, we talk about IoT device, but the same principle can be applied, for example, an implantable medical device, because they are affected by the same type of threats. Basically, like my approach is a sort of combination. So my study find also like significant patterns that are consistent between this type of attack. So even if they're an heterogeneous system, they always show some pattern that we can recognize and design the system for like prevent that. For example, there are certain vulnerabilities, for example, on hard drive that are the same of like a IoT device, but also, for example, camera systems for autonomous vehicles. And this is based on the resonance frequency of the sensor. Mitigating this resonance frequency is possible. And like I study system and mitigation techniques that no matter what kind of device you attack that has this kind of sensor or electrical components, because or maybe part of my work is also analyze all the hardware components that have like a similar behavior, you can compensate and mitigate that across the system. So if like the next generation devices can use like these mitigation techniques. They can actually compensate even for attacks that are not yet been discovered, but they are based on the same principle. Is try to break the attacker chain that induce like the same effect due to this kind of threat. And this happen for a variety of devices. They all use the same principle, like in the basic electronic level. So you can go with a defense across layers using that technique. And that is what I'm trying to do. Instead, for the machine learning part, like part of explainability can also, or maybe one of the goals of my research is also to incorporate like explainability techniques for model to security, because it's not had been done before, and including like hardware on this kind of techniques.
Thank you. Leila, do you have a question? Sorry to want to give Leila if she has a question.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
So I would like to thank Sara for the very interesting presentation. So at this point, we are at the conclusion of the symposium. And I would like to thank the finalists and the jury. I want just to mention that the winner will be announced at the ISSNAF annual event, which will take place on December 9th at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So will be 11 in the, so the event is public, is organized jointly with the Embassy of Italy in the US, and is open to the public. So I hope that Leila and Anna will be able to join, and Maggie as well. So, and I would like to leave the floor to Cinzia, the president of ISSNAF. So if Cinzia has any concluding remarks for the symposium.
Thank you, Elisa. Thank you to the juries and to the finalists. Actually, I would like to give the opportunity to Professor Maggie Phillips Gerla to say a few words. We are grateful for the support of the Gerla family, and it's always a very fulfilling experience when we bring here together the early career researchers that are continuing in the tradition that Mario so much cared for. Maggie, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Cinzia. Thank you, Elisa and Leila and Anna. I truly appreciate you spending your efforts in selecting such outstanding set of finalists. Nando, Filippo, Sara, your work is impressive, not only for the quality of the work, the avant-garde nature of it, and also that you're not only trying to resolve technical problems, but more importantly, trying to look at how those might affect societal and address societal problems. Mario's, I have a little picture of Mario here. So this is an old picture from a UCLA magazine of him. I can see his fingerprint on all of your work. You know, his work was in so many different areas. Possibly you've had an opportunity to use it. I hope that it has given you some foundation. But more importantly, Mario, as Cinzia mentioned, was an incredibly strong promoter of young researchers, young scholars, and particularly young Italian scholars. He had a sign outside his door that said, "Italians always welcome," on his office at UCLA. And I do know that each of you would be warmly welcomed into the Network Research Lab at UCLA if he was here with us. And I know actually he is here with us and watching your work progress. Congratulations to you all.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you, Maggie. It's so nice.
Right. Thank you. We will see you all on December 9th then. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.